The Arrogant History of White Ben, Chapter 15, To Meet Ben Campion. Ben's sermon had consequences. Thys, who never wore white, charged into Percy's room and borrowed what she needed. "I do as I'm told," said Thys with a flattered giggle. Percy pondered, then said that she always wore white anyway, and Angela's dresser, whom Angela took with her everywhere, as a man will take an umbrella, had no sooner finished hooking Percy into her picture frock than she hurried to her mistress with her version of Ben's colorblindness. Angela thought it only courteous to humor a guest, and changed instantly out of her pink lace into the fabulous white Chinese coat which had cost her more than her mink. "These little high-necked wraps are so comfortable," said Angela, "when one doesn't want to dress." She said it to old Lady Pont, who was, of course, the first to arrive. Lady Pont wore her blue uniform and apologized for it without sincerity. "I oughtn't be here," said Lady Pont, swallowing her cocktail with a large-minded "delicious," and settling down seriously to a plate of potato chips. "I'm off duty, but I've got about 200 letters to deal with. Kathy Kingham was so upset by the cessation that I can't trust her with an address book. I'll be glad to get my secretary back from munitions," said Lady Pont. "I suppose Bothering can tell us when that's likely." "Jenny will," said Angela, passing her a second cocktail. "Jenny coming? That girl ought to be in the War Office. She'd move them on. My dear, that was a ghastly business last night. That poor creature. She used to cut me. Some fainted slight, I never knew what. I was too busy to care either, God forgive me. Do you know what they're doing about the poor little girl? I'd be so glad to help. Ah, there's Bus and Jenny. That's Arthur Latimer with him, isn't it?" And she stared in frank admiration at the handsome hero, as he and Bothering, young Barnstable, and Jenny Oleron all came out together through the sun parlor on the upper terrace. There was instantly a pleasant gabble of welcome, introductions, and old acquaintances renewed. Thetis and Persephone added themselves. Then Edgar arrived, wary and ruffled as old James, partly because he did not like Jenny Oleron, but chiefly because someone had been into his dressing room and upset his shirt drawer. "Angela!" he said to his wife whenever he got near her. "Angela!" and twitched her sleeve. But Angela resolutely ignored these appeals as she introduced Teddy Barnstable to old Lady Pont. Angela, whispered to Persephone, that her nose was still shiny, poured out cocktails, and admired Jenny's yellow cocktail frock. "I can't now, Edgar," she told Arthur Latimer that she knew his sister. Indeed, she made a little too much fuss of Jenny and Arthur. But then, as a virtuous woman, she had been a little too cool at the beginning of their affair, but when everyone had concluded to smile upon it, and the scandals of pre-war days had been wiped out of mind, it would have been eccentric to remain cool. Arthur Latimer, dear Arthur, was a hope of the country for months and months. Everyone knew that government would have to call upon him as it had once called upon Gordon and Kirchner. And with Arthur Latimer in charge, Britannia would rule the air again. But war dribbled on, and Arthur Latimer did brilliantly, and the government did nothing about him. Then people began to say that his flying was a blind for more exciting activities, that where he went treaties followed, or that he brought home military secrets as other men bring home trade samples. Then they said he was drinking himself to death. Then he was seen about with old Bus and Jenny Oleron, and people nodded, and were once more satisfied. "Something's bound to happen. Old Bus is backing Arthur Latimer." Naturally, Angela had been nice to Jenny Oleron, talking clothes, talking theater, overtelling the story of the strike in the kitchen, and bidding everyone survey the wonders wrought in a minute and a quarter by herself and Illico Smith. Latimer lifted his eyebrows. "Illico Smith? Oh, do you know him?" "We used to call him Aunt Illico, but it's another surname," said Latimer without expression. "Well then, do you know the creature he's working for, Ben Campion? I haven't broken it to you Do you yet know, Edgar dear? Not now. We've got 2 extra for dinner. A Mr. Campion. Ben Campion? How delightful, began Lady Pont. Oh, you know him. Grand, and indeed the news was a real relief to Angela, so her judgment had not wobbled. You see, I came upon a car smash this afternoon, quite horrible, and Mr. Campion was hauling a wretched chauffeur literally out of the flames, she broke off. Yes, of course, one of yours, Jenny. I brought him here. He was very shaken. Has he telephoned you yet? She turned irritable. I tell you, not now, Edgar, later! But it was not Edgar, it was Trelawney. Mr. Smith's compliments, miss, and he thinks everything is in hand. Then with emotion, It's all right, madam, he's dished up. Ask him to come out. But Illico was already appearing. He was more presentable. Nothing about him of the dishevelment, the heat, the aroma of the amateur cook. Angela, as she gave him his cocktail, blessed him loudly. And how are you? How marvellous, how punctual. You know everyone, don't you? Mr. Smith, who has saved our lives. And she introduced him airily, and then, are we to begin? Where is Mr. Campion? Illico set down his glass in a hurry. I'll get him. Give me 2 minutes. He's quite hopeless about time, you know. If you'll begin shifting, then... She blessed the man's tact. She was renowned for her swan-upping. A little too much so. And, after all, it was Bothering's evening. It was secession night. Let the new capture swim in quietly. There was no hurry. Everyone was happy except Edgar, and Bessie Pont and old Buss were hand in glove as usual. Another cocktail, Bessie. Deliciously cold, said Lady Pont, accepting instantly, and then to Bothering. Go on. Ha! We're allowed ice tonight, are we? Edgar smiled malignantly at his wife. They're good, aren't they? Said Angela to Lady Pont, amiably surprised, but Lady Pont was listening to Bothering. So I flew over Washington, Buss was saying, and took Nell on my way down. Only heard by chance that she was still in England. I had not dreamt that she was short of money. My blame. She was a friend. You never knew that, did you? Or you never knew her, did you? A pity. I called. She didn't return it. I'm an old frump, my dear. What will become of the child? Jenny will find a good school. I shall come over and see her. She's a bright little thing. Perhaps. There were no tears. Your Nell was rather a Spartan with her, I fancy. She's not accustomed to making friends, but she used to talk to me shyly over the gate, policewoman's privilege. You waste your time in that uniform, he said, glowering at the blue cloth and buttons. My dear Buss, I'm the prop of 2 villages. One of them's yours. Yes, Angela? Angela was marshalling her party. We're dining on the little terrace. It's such a hot night, but keep your furs on, Jenny, because they suit you. And then I thought we'd be happier out of doors. Yes, isn't it charming? And to feel that we can allow ourselves electric light again. Percy did all the wiring, didn't you, Percy? You'll sit by me, Buss. Percy, you come next. Edgar, I'm putting you between Jenny and Bessie. Have you finished your cocktail, Bessie? Take it with you. Then to Latimer. You're on Percy's right. Ah, there's Mr. Campion at last. Edgar, this is Mr. Campion. For Ben was emerging from the twilight of the doorway. Petal had wrought wonders. Not that he'd let me into the bathroom with him for 1 moment, was Petal's account of his triumphant valeting. And when he come out, he looked like the hanger of a cabin trunk. No idea at all how to assume his clothes, see what I mean? But in physique he lent himself, and I soon put him to rights. Of course, the white suit looked pretty strange. At the time, it wouldn't now. You never see a black dinner jacket nowadays. But then it was an innovation. Unless you'd been in the tropics, which I hadn't. But White Ben carried it as to the manner born. It was always like that with him. He'd no more idea he could be wrong, and so he wasn't, if you take me, finishes the loyal Petal, who thereby describes pretty accurately the reaction of the gathering. It was cessation night. They liked each other sufficiently. There had been relays of cocktails. They were ready for entertainment. Angela's white madmen promised well. They paused amiably to stare and be introduced. Ben also paused to stare, as Petal said. It did not embarrass him to be conspicuous. He had always stood alone, elevated above weeds, expecting to hold the eye. Now he stood alone, elevated above the company. Naturally, they were to look up at him, and he would look down upon them. Some personalities he recognized at once. Angela's perfume saved him even a glance. So did This's laugh. Thrusting nose and pumpkin head, that was old Ben. Next to him was Latimer, the flying man, whom he thought he could like, whom he was glad to see again. The yellow woman at his elbow was that bitch Jenny Oleron. Then Ben's eyes began to glow, and he limped hurriedly down the steps. He had seen a friend, a someone who liked Ben Campion, who would always give Ben Campion advice, kindness, and a shakedown at 13 Lucy Street in the telephone book. Parting the little group with a free, unconscious flap of either arm, he went straight to Bessie Pont, took her hands in his, and dimly recollecting Illico's procedure of the afternoon, and adapting it to his own feeling, stooped and kissed her. She was taken aback, but she was immensely touched and pleased. She patted his hand. "Well," quoth she, "and how have you learned since yesterday? And where did you get to bed? Or didn't you? My dear nice boy, I'm very pleased to see you. Angela," she called from the terrace, "can't Mr. Campion take me in to dinner?" And so wrecked Angela's table, Angela having arranged to have Bothering on her right and Ben on her left. However, she swept her party on to the kitchen terrace and put Illico on her left, with this beside him, then Teddy Barnstable, then Ben. "Of course, Bessie darling, Mr. Campion shall sit next to you. You are on Edgar's right." Angela might not have genius, but there was no more competent performer on the English stage. And that is the end of chapter 15.